Hello everybody on the beautiful website of YouTube, this is your Uncle Google coming here, and today it is finally time for me to sit down and review the smash hit horror phenomenon that is It. Going into this movie, I went in with some quite high expectations because of the praise this movie has gotten, and seemed like everyone seemed to like it. Why shouldn't I like it? I have a very fond memory of watching the It miniseries years ago and just thinking that this is a concept that is really good. It's a really strong concept, but it's done in such a comedic and goofy way that you just can't take it seriously. Yes, I adore the original It TV movie with Tim Curry. I mean, it's fucking hilarious, but is it really supposed to be hilarious? Well, no. If you look at the context and if you look at the story and what Stephen King intended it to be, it shouldn't be. So when people were saying that this movie was actually really good, it was very dramatic, it had some really good scares, and that Bill Skarsgård was truly terrifying as Pennywise, I bought into the hype and I was like, this is going to be great. Well, not entirely. There are some fantastic things about these films, don't get me wrong, but it also falls into some horror cliches and tropes that just feel so tiring to this point, and that just drags this movie down. Let's start with the good things though. We should start with this to say that the whole cast of characters who we follow in this town of Derry, that the clown, the evil entity, the demonic entity you could say, terrorizes in, they are very relatable and well-established guys and girls. This is a great ensemble of characters. It's very much reminiscent of true 80s movies like Stand By Me or E.T., where we have a bunch of kids, you know, just doing lots of horror science mumbo jumbo, or they get caught up in this horror mumbo jumbo, and they are just a great set of characters, you know. I mean, it's a little bit stereotypical. You have the black kid, you have the Jewish kid, you have the fat kid, you have the nerd kid, you have the joker kid, and then you have the one who stutter, you know. But they are all relatable, and then you have the girl who has a hard time at home, but they are very well established. You clearly get their fears, you clearly get their motivations, and you get them as characters. I think they're very well established, and they are relatable. You find it enjoying to watch them, to watch their journey. I mean, some of the greatest scenes in this movie are just about really the kids just hanging out and having a good time together. It's some of the comedy I think hits very well. Some people might think it's a little bit too raunchy and a little bit childish, but I like it. I like the humor. It felt authentic to me, you know, how these kids would behave in this situation. And I feel like all of the kids, even though maybe being a little paper thin in characters, you know, being a little stereotypical, they are still established enough for me to root for them, to care for them, and actually be like, I really hope they get out of this situation and that they can defeat It, Pennywise, who is played by Bill Skarsgård, and Bill Skarsgård does a good performance. He really does. It's a really good performance. However, it goes into a little goofy territory at times, but I feel like when it goes into goofy territory, it's intentional. Very much like in Tim Curry's performance, it feels like Bill Skarsgård knows what he's doing, and he knows what he's aiming for all the time. And when he wants to be creepy, he surely is creepy. And when he has his scary scenes, they are quite scary, albeit there are a little bit too few of them, but we get into that later. So I think the characters are really good, they're well established, we root for them, we want them to succeed. I also think the movie has a very good pace, it flows very well, it never really gets to halt or feels like it slows down, it's never like that dragging feeling. And the movie is 2 hours and 50 minutes long, so that's a good praise, especially for a horror movie that's long. Those things could happen. I mean, a movie like The Conjuring 2, I really liked that movie, but I feel it's a little bit overlong and overstays its welcome just by 10 or 20 minutes. So, but It never has that feeling. It really feels like it has a great pace, and you always root for the characters. And the final encounter with Pennywise that this group has is just great. It really is. I mean, is it scary? No, not in the way I would hope for, but it's very much an entertaining showdown, if you can say. You know, the showdown of their fears and such. And yeah, it's a good conclusion, I believe, to the movie, because this movie is very entertaining in the fashion like Stranger Things was really entertaining. I will say Stranger Things is definitely better, because Stranger Things went in a little bit more fresh and original roots, even though being a mixed bag of inspirations from everything, basically, it still had a little bit more interesting directions to go, where it kind of goes down the route you really expect it to. But I still think it's very entertaining. You really like the characters. There are some great humor that is very relatable. So now let's get into the bad parts of this movie. The acting is not always as good as you would hope. Let's just say this: the kids' acting is great. I think all the kid actors in this movie does a really good job. The problem very much comes with the adults. They are very, very one note and feels very over exaggerated or over the top in their performances. Like Beverly, the girl, her dad is supposed to be like this creepy domestic abuse dad, but he just comes off like a rapist pedophile. And, I mean, it doesn't work because he is in like 2 scenes, so it just feels like they make him as over exaggeratedly evil and disgusting as they can. Granted, the scenes are creepy and disturbing, but it feels forced at the same time. And I feel the same with the mom of the asthma kid. I can't remember his fucking name, but she's like this fat blob who's just sweating and supposed to be like disgusting and, you know, supposed to be this paranoia character who kind of puts the fears into her kid. It's just over-exaggerate the characters, so one note and not interesting and just over the top. I mean, you can't take them seriously, really. And if there's anything in this movie you can't take seriously, it's the scary parts. This is as mainstream as horror goes. If you think movies like The Conjuring are very mainstream horror, then it will probably leave you even more underwhelmed. They used way too much effects and way too little build up and tension building towards the scares, in my opinion. And when things are supposed to be scary, they just feel too splashy, too over top, and too much. I mean, honestly, there are scenes in the original It that I probably find more creepy and scary than in this movie, because they build up and they are a little bit lesser in their approach and not just so much fucking in your face. Like I said, there are definitely some creepy scenes with Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise and other stuff also happening, you know, because it feeds off the kids' fears, which means it will transform into what they actually fear. So there are some interesting, scary or somewhat scary parts going on, and some of them are just ridiculous and over the top. The asthma kid has kind of a thing for diseases, so he sees kind of a leper guy, and yeah, that was just silly as fuck. We were 3 people in theaters, me and 2 friends, and we were laughing our ass off. It just felt so over the top and so not scary. And all the scenes that's supposed to be scary are very much the jump scare scenes, but they are done with the most overuse of CGI I've seen in a horror movie probably ever. And I was afraid of this because the director Andy Muschietti, he did Mama, which was an okay film, but also a film that felt way too reliant on CG and way too reliant on like, oh, it's a dramatic concept, which means it's a dramatic horror film. Not necessarily true, and I feel kind of the same thing with It. The dramatic approach and the dramatic hypes are never really hit where I feel Muschietti wanted to be, because he kind of feels like this one, he has good ideas and he take good scripts and he's like, oh, this is a good script, I definitely want to turn this into, you know, a more dramatic horror film that actually will move you and scare you. Sadly, he doesn't really succeed in any of those areas. The drama works okay, the scares don't really work at all. Like, I wasn't scared at one single moment. There was one scene that was kind of creepy with Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, who is in this movie. He is in a room full of clown dolls, and you're like, holy shit, this is actually quite intense. But I still saw where it was going, you know, foresaw what was supposed to be the scare in the scene. So it is very generic in that sense, and I know some people will say, well, is generic always bad? You know, it's something familiar. And I feel like I would probably have liked this movie more if it came out before Stranger Things. And now it didn't come out before Stranger Things. Stranger Things actually happened, so the story feels very familiar. I still relate to these characters. They're very good and they're established in good fashion. However, I just don't feel as it does enough new to grant its being, you know, put on a pedestal like, wow, this is the great horror film of this generation or something. However, I also really get the mainstream appeal, and I also really get why people are thinking this movie is fantastic and why they love it. All power to them, but I feel like this movie is not going to be that memorable. When I look back at horror movies, let's say 10-15 years from now, it is not going to be one of the horror movies I think of, especially not when I think of 2017, where we have had indie smash hits like Get Out, we have had Raw, and It Comes at Night. Whatever you feel about those movies, all of those movies are memorable because they go in very interesting and different directions, and it kind of doesn't do that. I'm sorry. Yes, Bill Skarsgård is good as Pennywise. Yes, the kids' characters are really entertaining and really relatable. They are cute, they're funny, and there are some really, you know, overall entertaining scenes and some okay scares, but most of the scares just feels too much in your face for you to care. And I also feel like some of the soundtrack was very over dramatic, like they amped it up too much. Like there's a scene when the fat kid, I believe his name is he Ben? I think it's Ben. He's being chased by the bullies, and they have like the most over dramatic music, like he was actually chased by Pennywise and not the bullets. It feels just a little too much at times. A great ensemble of characters that embarks on a journey that flows good, but really does feel familiar and doesn't scare or hit as dramatically as it was built up to. In the end, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, because it really is an entertaining film. It really has good characters. I mean, for being child actors, I think all of them does a really good job. They really portray their characters very well, and you really get their motivations. The actors that are bad in these movies are actually the adults. Bill Skarsgård, good as Pennywise, can't complain there. I really like the comedy, like I said, and you know, it's very just, it flows good. It has a very, I will also say, yeah, the cinematography is good. It's movie look that looks good, but it is very generic in its jump scare, and it has an overusage of CGI, and I don't like an overusage of CGI at all, but I definitely don't like it in my horror movies. And I was kind of afraid of this happening when I saw that Muschietti was taking on this project after I had seen Mama with him, and it kind of went in that direction. I will say it is better than Mama because of its character that you root for, because of, you know, some of the dramatic scenes being a little bit more developed and some of the scares being actually okay. But overall, I am a little bit underwhelmed by it. I cannot deny that. But at the same time, it's also a movie that I definitely feel like I can rewatch and just have fun with. You know, just like with Stranger Things. But at the same time, I feel like, why shouldn't I just watch Stranger Things instead? Because Stranger Things is really just a much better it at this point. I also feel like that is why so many people like it. Like they saw Stranger Things and then they saw it and it's like, oh, it's like Stranger Things, it's like kids and they are trying to defeat this clown. In Stranger Kids, they are trying to find their friend and defeat this alien, blah blah blah. You know, it's very familiar. It has its tropes, and sometimes we just like what we familiar to, you know. So I can't blame people for enjoying this movie as much as they do. I enjoyed it, but I was underwhelmed. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy it, then leave that dislike. If you want to see more reviews from me and other content, subscribe to my channel. I have been your Uncle Gurga. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.
Kiss me, fat boy.